Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to the MTS Public Security Committee, and we're going to go ahead and get started. It is 1:02 p.m. So that everyone can go off and enjoy their weekends. I will call this meeting to order. Hasil, you may call the roll.
Members, please mark your attendance on the tablets. Chair, we have a quorum.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. First, let's go ahead and take non-agenda public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on items that are not on the agenda today. Do we have anyone that wishes to comment?
No public comment, Chair.
Okay, all right. So let's go then to the approval of the minutes from our October 9th meeting, I believe. Yeah, from last year. Was that the last meeting we had or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Okay, all right. There's a motion on the floor in a second. So I think we have to go to the voting machine, I think, for the minutes. All right, let's go ahead and take a vote.
Members, make your selections on the tablets. Chair, motion passes.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we are going to go in the order of the agenda, and we will start with item number 4. We know that item number 6 is a very substantive item. So we will, let's just go ahead and go. Let's just go ahead and go in order. Let's start with item number 4.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dan Brisland. I'm the Director of Transit Security and Passenger Safety. And as always, it's an honor to speak in front of this committee and talk about some of the things we are doing. It's also a pleasure to talk a little bit about today about a position that we created in late 2024, and we've seen it evolve over the last year. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the evolution of it and who we currently have in place. But before we start, I'd like to introduce our new Deputy Director. That's Herb Taft. It's a pleasure to have him here. So just talk a little bit about this position. It takes a unique type of person to fulfill it, not just someone who does investigation, but someone who has a history of showing compassion and advocacy for victims. I'd like to introduce our special investigator. This is Ron Bailiff. He came with us December of 2025 and brings over 30 years of law enforcement experience with the San Diego Police Department, where he served a wide range of operational, investigative, and leadership roles. He's a 15 years patrol assignments. He also served for a decade on the SWAT team. His investigative experience spans 11 years, where he worked in area investigation, juvenile investigations, centralized narcotics, domestic violence, sex crimes, fraud. He also served on the San Diego County Sexual Assault Response Team Board. These roles really gave him an extensive investigative background. In a leadership management capacity, Ron served as the operations manager for the San Diego Family Justice Center, a collaborative agency dedicated to supporting victims of domestic violence and human trafficking. He also held the role of program manager and supervisor for the San Diego Regional Fraud Task Force, where he oversaw investigations working with the United States Secret Service, Internal Revenue Service, and the San Diego District Attorney's Office. And just prior to this assignment, where we hired him, Ron was the administrator for the Relationship Resource, a nonprofit focused organization that's providing restorative support and therapy for individuals impacted by trauma. So you can see just a diverse mix of law enforcement and investigations and victim advocacy. We're really happy to have him. Today's focus is to talk a little bit about a summary of his position, why it was created, and some of the successes we've had so far, and where we look to improve and develop our program. Just to give you a little bit I talk a little bit about our specialized assignment. This is our newest one, but these are our current specialized assignments. It's important to, as you can see, our homeless outreach team has continued to develop over the years. Right now, our outreach team we've added an additional person to the team. We continue to extend our reach with our outreach organizations. Our HOT team collaborates with outreach. We also provide food and clothing for those in need. We also recently hosted a CARES event at the Palomar Trolley Station. The District Attorney Care Center in San Diego hosts monthly resource fairs for the unhoused, offering services like substance use rehab, homeless court, DMV services, and birth certificate assistance. We're excited that MTS is now going to be an ongoing part of this event. You'll see on the right, this is CCI Pedroza and her new canine partner, Chili. She came back from Texas back in December, and she is now fully certified as an explosive detection device. Explosive detection canine. She's a regional asset. They're both regional assets, meaning they will be deployed anywhere throughout the region and have done so since she's been in service multiple times. And we're actually very excited. And she's a very enthusiastic and happy puppy. Just a reminder, yeah, our CAMPS team addresses environmental issues, encampments, and other provide support and resources to our unsheltered population. Our training unit, as I covered on our last time, has expanded significantly. We talked about some of the training that we've done that included ongoing in-service training, but our academy, we recently extended for an entire week in order to cover important areas like anti-discrimination, anti-racial profiling, de-escalation, sexual assault investigations, and investigations. And we've talked about before, our bus team and our passenger safety team, they deal with acute issues on the system with the support of our crime analysts. So we continue to grow on that. We're very proud of our specialized units, but we'll go into our special investigator. Prior to the creation of this position, there was no ability to investigate crimes after they occurred. It's a position that we recognize there were situations where people don't want to press charges and they'll leave. People don't want to wait for law enforcement and then it becomes stale. Yet the suspect's still out there, yet the crime has still occurred. And we believe that we had a responsibility to be part of the solution. And that's where that's with the creation of this. Okay, these are misdemeanor offenses. A lot of times law enforcement don't have the resources to come out and do long-term investigations, identify prolific offenders on the system. So we work directly with the city attorney and local police to create processes where we can file cases directly with the city attorney. We can also provide information for ongoing investigations to law enforcement to develop their investigations. The special investigator position was created to provide support for victims, employees, local law enforcement, and San Diego prosecutorial branches. So our special investigator conducts investigations into crimes that fall within the scope of our authority. Our folks are not peace officers, neither are transit officers or our security officers. Our CCIs have the power of arrest for misdemeanors that were committed in their presence based on misdemeanors approved by the board. And we do investigations within the scope of that with the support of law enforcement. We also support law enforcement agencies with ongoing investigations where they may need assistance. A significant role of this position is to understand that this is not a replacement for law enforcement. We don't have obviously, we are not a law enforcement agency. We are simply a support system for all of these different branches. So you can see a big part of our mission is victim support and advocacy. We reach out to victims. If they decided they didn't want to press charges, we don't want to make sure they feel okay. We want to make sure that, you know what, we may give them a warm handoff to law enforcement. We may guide them through the criminal justice system because a lot of people don't know. And a lot of people don't know how serious it is. And they may not know that the person that victimized them is a prolific offender and has other victims, which may change the way they look at the situation because it really is trauma. Obviously, our special investigator, along with advocacy, is all about a liaison with law enforcement. Ron, being a career law enforcement professional, understands the criminal justice process, understands how a crime scene is supposed to be processed, and the priorities, not only about the priorities of what law enforcement needs, but what MTS needs and what our passengers need as well. So it's advocacy and support on that front. Okay, primary focus, as I talked about before, of Ron's work is crimes against persons, specifically sex-related offenses on the transit system. These types of cases are often underreported and difficult to investigate, yet have a significant impact, like I said, on victims. Witnessing lewd acts and forced observation of indecent exposure is a form of sexual abuse, as we know. It can cause PTSD, it can cause depression, it can cause individuals to experience the anxiety, and we want to be part of creating a process where we mitigate that as much as possible. He also looks into simple batteries and investigative support for law enforcement. Historically, we also want to support our employees. Our employees are often victims of crime, and sometimes these crimes were overlooked. His role is to, anytime one of our employees is a victim of a crime, to reach out to them and provide them support, whether they want prosecution or not. We want to make sure that we've done everything else that we can to mitigate that as well. One of the most recent efforts that we've made is we have an ongoing issue where people simply refuse to sign a citation. And as we all know, it's not an admission of guilt, rather a written promise to appear in court. And we do have the ability to take them from in front of a magistrate if necessary, but oftentimes it's not safe to do so. It's not worth the intrusion, and it's not feasible after court hours. To address this issue, a new process has been implemented utilizing a case submission through the San Diego City Attorney's Office. In cases like these, in cases where citations cannot be completed, either due to refusal or evolving circumstances, the case is now submitted, documented, and reviewed. This ensures individuals are held accountable and cases just simply don't fall through the procedural gaps, because if they're not signed and nothing's done, it just gets dropped and it goes away. So I'd like to talk a little bit about, and there's a lot of cases we could talk about, but I'll talk a little bit about some of the successes that we've had. One case involved an indecent exposure incident where the victim was a minor. With the assistance of state parole, the suspect was positively identified as a registered sex offender and repeat offender on the MTS system. Our investigators submitted the case to a local law enforcement agency, and the suspect was taken into custody. An additional case, a male previously served with an MTS ban letter committed unprovoked batteries on 3 victims, including 2 adults and 1 minor female. Our investigator coordinated with 2 law enforcement agencies, and the suspect was identified and taken into custody for the offenses. In a notable case, and kind of one of our showcases this was in 2025, we had an individual who was linked to 10 separate lewd acts on our trolley in 2025. This was an extensive investigation with multiple victims. Our investigator conducted a full investigation. His multiple cases were aggregated with a San Diego PD case, resulting in a conviction and permanent ban from the system. So that's the success that we've had in paying attention to multiple offenders that we can really pay attention to and address on our system. So these are just some of the examples of the program that's having success, and we look forward to continuing to grow and create process that further support our patron safety. And we're seeing that in these case results, and we're going to continue to do so. Matter of fact, he was on the phone with someone about an hour ago. There's additional roles for this job. Obviously, having, we're all law enforcement. I'm retired law enforcement, but he has the time to sit down with our CCIs who are often young and inexperienced, and often also aspire to do something like be in law enforcement. He creates that mentorship role with our code compliance inspectors and our transit security officers, really showing them what they need to do, not only investigative techniques, report writing quality, legal articulation, case preparation, but behavioral expectations. Why it's important to gain the trust of our community, why it's important to really act professional and create professional product. And he's really done a great job with that. A big part of that is training. Right now, Ron, we told you we did our extended law enforcement academy where he taught sexual assault investigations, where he taught investigative techniques. These are all things these young CCIs who are coming out of the field will have a foundational understanding along with the priorities that we've already established. Again, having that understanding of how the law enforcement system works is critical. We've expanded the role, having a law enforcement professional respond to major crime scenes, Ron, to create continuity with investigations for law enforcement and places less disruption on public transportation. The incident command system, I'm sure you're all aware of, is a standardized on-scene all hazard management approach for commanding and controlling emergencies incidents. Is to provide flexible, modular structure, scaling on up and down that allows personnel, different agencies to blend in a unified team. In these situations, our investigator acts as the unified command liaison with law enforcement, providing support on scene for law enforcement, but also providing information for MTS personnel to support in that incident. And it's really been successful so far. So we'd say organizational benefit or impact. It clearly is going to enhance employee confidence because of the expertise that we'll constantly be giving our employees on how to deal with these situations. It strengthened partnerships with law enforcement, greater accountability for patrons, and most importantly, patron safety. Our future goals, and we're not staying stagnant. We're going to continue to grow in this position, and we're really excited about it. We really want to expand our investigative matrix, our ability to track things on the system, expand our training and mentoring programs, strengthen prosecution pathways with our partner branches, and enhance collaboration with regional agencies to bring down our assaults, bring down our loot acts, bring down our crimes that we are able to address, and also support law enforcement in their mission. And this is fully supported with our mission statement. Our mission in partnership with the communities we serve is to provide a safe and pleasant public transportation experience aligned with our core values of honesty, integrity, trust, respect, fairness, loyalty, diversity, and I also add compassion every time we speak to our folks. And this is kind of off topic, but I'd like to celebrate Aska. Aska served with us for 8.5 years. She's been to the Super Bowl multiple times. She's gone through multiple critical incidents. She's gone to the airport. She's gone to high schools, and she is retired as of the end of March and spending the retirement with her handler and friend, Sergeant Bautista. Any questions or comments?
Aska looks very serious, like playing no games with this job. Congratulations for retirement. Thank you so much for the presentation. Before we go to committee members' comments, do we have any public comment on this item?
No public comment, Chair.
Okay, thank you so much. Any committee members? Member Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. Let's go back to slide 6 if we could. Because the transit system crosses several jurisdictions, when something happens, are you saying in this slide that will always go to the city attorney? Is that who has jurisdiction, or how does that work?
No, we have submitted things through the district attorney as well. We also issue citations to the district attorney. We're in the middle of creating processes that we hope to duplicate with the district attorney once we've had it put in place. This is actually just something that we've just started. So if it becomes something that we can duplicate with the district attorney, we absolutely will.
So if an incident happens in El Cajon, is El Cajon PD the law enforcement organization you're working with, or is it the district attorney investigator?
It's Ron works with every local law enforcement agency. He would directly contact one of your detectives or a supervisor and provide either a warm handoff of a victim, information, or support the investigative role in a major incident. So if it happened on the system, he would show up to your scene and really just provide guidance on a public transit system, which is a very unique environment, even for law enforcement professionals to navigate.
Yeah, it's kind of a moving target, so to speak.
Yes.
So if somebody commits a crime on our system, it sounds like you're saying this will help other law enforcement agencies say, hey, this is a person who we allege has done something on our system. You might bundle up something in your jurisdiction if you also have a charge against this person. How do you find that out?
That's where Ron comes into play. I mean, we track, and also our analysts will find out, hey, we have someone who committed a crime in the city of San Diego, but ultimately we found out that they committed a crime in La Mesa when they committed a crime in El Cajon. And these agencies may not know. And we bring everyone together and say, wow, this is the same person, because we are a major artery that goes through multiple jurisdictions and cities.
Because you could commit a crime at a station in a city and then get on the trolley and move somewhere else and commit a crime on the trolley. But unless they kind of talk to each other, you don't know.
In completely different cities.
Yes. So I'm hoping that's kind of where we're going, is a safer system.
Yes.
For a safer system. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. And I would just add, this whole process partly came up because we would see some of these reports of victims not wanting to press charges, and it was frustrating because we want the system to be safe. And so we want justice for that individual, but we also want to prevent and prohibit these actions from continuing on our system. And so we started with a conversation with the San Diego City Attorney to say, do we need to request legislation so MTS can be the victim? It doesn't seem fair that it's, you put it all on the shoulders of an individual person that was just riding the trolley to pursue the crime. And we really see MTS as a victim itself if the crime is happening. And through conversations with the San Diego City Attorney over several years, they determined that that was not required. We didn't need to go get legislation. And it was a matter of us working together to figure out what type of documentation, because we have amazing evidence. We have video that really shows who they are. And so learning what reports, what witness interviews do we need to put together, video that then we hand off to them, and then they can pursue the case. And hopefully we can convince with that warm handoff the victim to participate. If they needed to, though, they could also subpoena the victim to be a witness. And so that's the process that we have been working on, and brought in Ron in this position to really put that packet together so that it makes it easy for the next person to take that step. So in the city of San Diego, most often I think we're working with the city attorney, though we do work with PD, but there's just some resource issues there. In the other jurisdictions, I think we have the other law enforcement agencies have a little more capacity where we hand it to them and then they work with the DA's office, but we also are happy to work directly with the DA. And I think we're hoping to kind of take the pilot of what we've worked out with the city attorney's office and then formally take that to the DA's office in the next year or so to do a similar process. But we don't have the same challenges of getting someone to pay attention to it in some of the other jurisdictions as we had, just because of the limited resources within the city of San Diego.
Thank you, Member Goebel, and thank you for Ms. Landers for that. I recall this kind of being a topic of conversation over the last couple of years. Member Hall.
Well, I think she just answered my question, but thank you. So if they don't want to press charges, we can still proceed is what I'm getting. And that's what I've wanted all along, because I know that I'm reading those reports, weekly basically, and they're saying that they don't want to press charges, and these are our own employees. And I'm saying, well, MTS is the victim here, not the employee, even though the employee is a victim, but the MTS is also a victim. So we can go ahead and move with that, is I guess was what I'm hearing. The other question real quick is permanently ban. What happens then when you see them next week on the trolley?
We have, with our current ban system, it's an administrative ban. With the city attorney, that's a criminal ban. So
Okay.
that would be something where law enforcement could come out and say that you violated the conditions of your probation.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I don't see anyone else on the light, so thank you again for the presentation. Oh, yes. Member Rodriguez, it's you just press that's it.
I was clicking on the screen. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, staff, for the presentation. It was very insightful. And I do think that in order for us to continue to grow our usage at our MTS system, we need to make sure that we provide a safe ridership experience. And in order to expand that to include families and children, it is critical that we provide a safe environment. And I've seen it firsthand, some of the lewd acts that occur, and it's unacceptable. And so, at least for me anyway, we can continue to support. I would be glad to do so. It is paramount for us to continue to grow our public safety, our public ridership system, to make sure that we have a safe environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Dillard.
Again, thank you for the report out. It was very informative, and I'm glad to see the new positions and your enhancement in the department. I had on a lighter note, a question about you mentioned the food and the clothing. And I just had a quick question. Do you get donations? How are you getting the food and the clothing?
Matter of fact, one of our members, she actually has been with us since the inception of our hot team, and she goes out and seeks donations
Oh,
for
wow.
clothing.
Okay.
She's very engaged. Cynthia Rogers, she does an outstanding job.
Thank you. That's all the question I had.
I think I have a picture with Cynthia somewhere. Mhm. Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you again. And I definitely agree, especially with the explanation of being able to get on the transit line and be in different jurisdictions. I think it's super important that we took this up. So thank you again. And so with that, there's no vote required on this item. We're going to move to item number 5. I hear that Ms. Samantha Leslie will be presenting this. This is the proposed revisions to ordinance number 2 related to proof of fare payment by passengers. Ordinance number 5 relating to the enforcement authorities of designated MTS employees, and ordinance number 13 related to prohibited conduct and actions on transit vehicles, transit facilities, trolley stations, and bus stops. Take it away.
Thank you. Again, my name is Samantha Leslie. I'm Deputy General Counsel here at MTS, and I'll also have Dan, the Director of Security, also stay up here with me in case there's any more technical questions about operations in the field. So per MTS's enabling legislation, the board is authorized to adopt ordinances and rules and regulations necessary to regulate the use and operation of our vehicles, facilities, and services. The board over time has adopted various ordinances, which all can be found on MTS's website. There's about 13. Other examples include regulations relating to parking at our parking lots and regulations for for-hire vehicles. As it relates to security-related ordinances, those include ordinance number 2, proof of fare payment, ordinance number 5, enforcement authorities of designated employees, and ordinance number 13, prohibited conduct on our system. Staff took the chance to review these ordinances and found that there may be changes recommended and warranted on these particular ordinances. The first ordinance is ordinance number 5. This is the ordinance that designates certain MTS employees to enforce violations of MTS ordinances and other local and state code sections and regulations applicable to prohibited conduct on our system. Staff reviewed ordinance number 5 and got feedback from security, and we found some sections that were obsolete or unused that we would recommend removing. Examples were forgery of checks and enforcement of expired vehicle registration. Staff in practice is not enforcing these, does not increase safety or assist operations. So we recommend removing some of these obsolete provisions. In addition, working with security, we recommend adding certain state code sections to ordinance number 5. First, it relates to assaults against MTS employees and passengers. Currently, when a battery occurs, as Ms. Brislina had mentioned in the last agenda item, we request local law enforcement assistance. But in the instances when local law enforcement assistance may not be able to timely assist, we currently allow designated MTS security staff to arrest and issue a citation for battery under Penal Code Section 242. After reviewing this area, we did realize the state legislature has taken over the last several years a more serious look at transit assaults due to the increased incidents against transit workers. And we noticed and identified some code sections in the penal code that have been recently amended to not only increase the penalties against assaults for transit workers, but also to expand the definition of transit workers. A lot of these statutes before had said something like station agents or only a bus operator, but assaults can happen against any MTS employee or contractor. And so now these statutes are a little bit more expansive to include all of those, as well as any person on a transit facility. So it is recommended that as another tool for security to deter this harmful behavior and ensure a safe system, to add the following 4 penal code sections: 71, 241.3, 243.3, and 243.35. The other area we spoke with security on is trespassing. Currently, MTS security designated employees may arrest and cite for any person who fails to leave MTS property that is not open to the general public or a building that's outside of the business hours and they refuse to leave. However, there are instances where security might have someone that is conducting prohibited conduct or causing a substantial disruption on a system. And one way to de-escalate that incident is asking them to leave our property. But the property, such as a vehicle or a transit station, is technically open to the public. And so there wasn't really a tool for security in the instances where they did refuse to leave. And law enforcement may or may not have been there to assist. There would be a need to have an additional code section to cite in these particular instances. So we recommend adding penal code section 369I and 555. Also, as Director Brisson had mentioned in the previous presentation, there are times when the court has issued a stay away order as part of a sentencing for an individual that's caused a criminal act against MTS or on MTS property. And so in those stay away orders, if we find that they're still coming onto our property and law enforcement, we would call law enforcement, but if they weren't able to assist, as another tool to cite them for violating that stay away order, we recommend adding penal code 166 to the list of statutes, the Ordinance 5. Weapons, there are instances when passengers may be found with weapons on their person. Whenever there's a firearm or another serious weapon like a grenade, we will call law enforcement. We will do our best to secure the system, but law enforcement are the experts in those more serious incidents and crimes. But there are examples where an individual on their person may have a knife or a BB gun type kind of weapon. And when law enforcement is unable to assist, we want to provide a tool to security to ensure safety across the system and enforce the prohibition of certain possessing of weapons on our system. So we recommend adding Penal Code Section 171.7 to the list of ordinances that they can enforce. Ordinance number 13. This ordinance lists all the prohibited conduct on board our vehicles and system. We reviewed ordinance number 13 with security staff, and we heard that there are instances when individuals may try to attempt to unlock or enter the enclosed and secure cabin of the trolley. So if you recall with the trolley, on each one, there's a cabin for the trolley operator, which may or may not have a trolley operator, depending on how many trains are connected. But there have been instances when people are trying to enter inappropriately in this enclosed area. And there's not really a section in ordinance number 13 currently that talks to this. So we recommend adding this because it is a safety issue for people to be getting into this very enclosed space. Secondly, we do have a duty under the CCRs to ensure certain safety measures are occurring on our vehicles. So one that includes ensuring that aisles and doorways of our vehicle are not blocked and that certain hazardous substances aren't on our vehicle. We, through our rules of writing, ensure that certain oversized cargo is not allowed on our vehicles and systems. And our transit personnel and bus operators do a lot of education and explanation when they find a passenger with oversized cargo to request that they not enter with those cargo items. There isn't really an ordinance prohibition on this, and so we recommend adding this. An example is when, for example, a stroller comes on board and it's kind of stacked with a lot of items. The problem is these large oversized cargo, there's no place to put them. And so you end up having to put it in the aisle. And if there's an emergency and passengers need to get out of the vehicle very quickly, that is an impediment to do that. Also, some of these oversized cargoes are very easily tippable, and that could cause another substantial disruption. If it leaks everywhere, then you have to pull the vehicle out of service. It also can do trips and falls. So it is something that occurs, and we recommend adding as another tool for them to cite as appropriate. Other revisions to Ordinance 13 are more cleanup, reorganizing ordinance provisions, clarifying when service animals are allowed to not be leashed or harnessed, and replacing dated terminology. Lastly, ordinance number 2. This ordinance talks about proof of valid fare. We reviewed ordinance number 2 and noticed that recently when we adopted contactless payment and it's allowed valid fare, we hadn't also updated ordinance 2 to show that it is proof of valid fare. So if you want to use your smartphone or your credit card to tap on a validator, that is now valid fare. And so we're just clarifying ordinance 2 that that is truly valid fare, and you do need to provide that upon request to security to verify that it's valid. And then other minor revisions, just clarifying that proof of fare is needed not only on trolley, but on fixed bus, and just replacing dated terminology. When we went from the old fare collection system Compass Card to Pronto, we didn't also update this ordinance with that new branding. So we updated that as a recommended revision. And with that, it is staff's recommendation that the Public Security Committee forward a recommendation to the board to adopt the proposed amendments to ordinance number 2, which is attachment A in red line, to ordinance number 5, which is attachment B, and ordinance number 13, which is attachment C. And Mr. Brislin and I are available for any questions.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Any public comment?
No public comment, Chair.
Okay, member comment. It sounds like I'll just start while you all think it through. Sounds like this is basically a cleanup, right? As we go through this and we're modernizing our systems. I just have one question. So for the trespassing, are posted signs are going to be required, or is the ordinance sufficient?
So one example I thought of with a posted property, and Mr. Brislin can clarify, is some of our right-of-way. We do have no trespassing on certain areas near the rail, something to use in examples when someone might violate entering into certain unauthorized areas such as that.
Yeah. That's correct. I mean, generally, when it comes to trespass, we do like to have signage. And these are specific than the traditional 602 PC, which has a different threshold.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. This is an action item. So we will need approval for this to move to the full board.
I'll go ahead and make the motion.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second. If there's no further discussion, let's go ahead and take a vote.
Members, make your selections on the tablets. Chair, motion passes.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to item number 6, and this is the Administrative Penalty Program under Public Utility Code, Section 99580 for fare evasion and passenger conduct violations. So Ms. Landers will be presenting this item.
Okay, I'm already on. Good afternoon, Karen Landers, as I think most of you know. This is a issue that we have been talking about for probably about 2 years now. So I'm going to walk you through where we are now, but to put this program in context, this is what we would do to change how we process citations for fare evasion and a couple of other passenger conduct violations, to just frame it in why do we care about those things? Why do we want to enforce them? You know, passenger safety and comfort and financial sustainability are, primary goals of MTS as we go through it. And so we do see that our ridership goals are heavily dependent on people wanting to ride transit and feeling safe to do so. And so there definitely need to be consequences for various conduct violations that impact the safety of others and the conditions of the facilities and our ability to operate. The board is well aware of the financial sustainability efforts that we have been making throughout the years and the budget situation we're in. And so we are very dependent upon people paying their fare each time that they ride. And just to put a little bit of historical context in it, back in fiscal year 2019, so pre-pandemic, our fare revenue was 32% of our operating budget. In the fiscal year 2026 recent mid-year budget adoption, fare revenue is 17% of our operating budget. And so we're still not at pre-pandemic levels, and expenses has significantly increased over the last 7 years, both just from CPI. We've also added Midcoast, a bunch of other services onto the system. And so you're well aware that there's other financial sustainability efforts that the board is making, but it is important to us to make sure that people do pay the fare that is required each time they ride. So our passenger conduct is in various different places throughout our policies and ordinances. We have kind of called them the rules for riding. And so we have, like you just heard, ordinance number 2 and ordinance number 13 about requiring proof of fare payment and prohibited conduct. We also have on our website a kind of plain language list of what the rules for riding are for people. And we do have a transit rider etiquette guide campaign that is also on our website called Respect the Ride. I encourage people to look at it. It's a lot of individual little issues, little videos to talk about, like what we're hoping to give everyone a pleasant riding experience for MTS. So as it relates to fare enforcement, MTS has what we would call a hybrid model. Like our current system right now is that we have a diversion program where after you receive a citation for not having proof of fare, for the first 120 days, you can request, if it's your first time, a one-time waiver. Otherwise, you can pay a reduced fine of $25 or complete 3 hours of community service within that 120-day time period. We also offer a limited appeal. You know, if there's some kind of reason that somebody thought that they shouldn't have gotten the ticket, might be a broken ticket vending machine. It could be that they actually had a valid fare, they just weren't able to provide proof of it. We will allow them within 15 days to submit that information to MTS. We will investigate it. And if it proves true, then we will dismiss the citation that way. And so if it's not, if the limited appeal is not granted, then they just have the right to follow the diversion program. If they don't ever participate in the diversion program over that first 120 days, then we send the citation to court for adjudication. And that goes to the San Diego Traffic Court. And so that from that point forward, the court resolves it and handles collections and everything related to that. And we actually don't receive any detailed reports on the results of the fines imposed or collected on individual cases. We do receive kind of big lump sums from the court where we get between $20,000 and $40,000 per year, but that also sometimes includes a restitution in various graffiti cases and things like that. So what an administrative penalty program is that under the Penal Code Section 640 is the penal code section that relates to not having proof of fare. And then Public Utilities Code Section 99580 sets up a way that within those two things, they say if a transit agency wants to, they can establish an administrative penalty option. So basically a non-criminal path for fare evasion and some specified passenger conduct violations. And in that case, that program is completely administered by the transit agency. It doesn't go to a court. And so the statute set forth what the maximum fines could be, what the required process is for administratively handling those, what the various notice periods are and appeal periods, what the hearing procedures are, and requiring community service options for people who have an inability to pay. So we have discussed just the concept of an administrative penalty program and what some of those would look like with the Public Security Committee. Since September 2024 was the first agenda item we had on that, and we then talked about it last year in May and in October. And the instruction that we got from the committee in October was to do further research and develop a proposed administrative penalty program that the committee could consider and decide if they wanted to recommend it to the board for implementation. So that's what we're here today to do. So in the packet, we have put together a draft ordinance. It would be ordinance number 14, and it would lay out our section 99580 program. In that, we have set the fine amount at $75. And then consistent with what the fine amount, kind of maximum amounts are in that program, they allow for a first or second offense, a maximum fine of $125. And so we have set it to be that if the first late fee, so if it's not right now under the code section, you have 21 days to contest the citation. So if you don't contest the citation, then after 21 days, it's final. And so if you don't pay it within that 21 days in the draft ordinance, there would be a $25 late fee. And then if you don't pay it within 90 days of the first reminder notice, then there would be another $25 collections fee that would be assessed to get to the maximum $125 under the statute. On the list of eligible violations, we have included all of the eligible violations under 640, except for a couple, but the ones that are listed under 640 that are included in this draft ordinance is fare evasion, misuse of a fare product, unauthorized use of a discount ticket or failure to show proof of eligibility for that discount ticket, smoking, eating, or drinking where or when it's prohibited, on the system, willfully disturbing others with boisterous and unruly behavior, willfully blocking the free movement of another person, skateboarding or biking, roller skating, any of those where or when prohibited. It's not every time. Selling goods on MTS property without permission, or failing to yield seating reserved for, and the statute uses the term elderly or disabled person. And I will say that a lot of the conduct violations are things that we rarely cite for, but they are things that are within the code section to say, if you cite for them, you're allowed to include them in this administrative program. And so we went ahead and did it, but it doesn't imply that it's a big problem for us. The things from the list that we did exclude is spitting. The legal term, as we all learned last time and I didn't, was expectorating, carrying an explosive or acid, flammable liquid, or toxic or hazardous materials in an MTS facility or vehicle, or urinating or defecating in an MTS facility or vehicle. And those were excluded, especially after the discussion of the committee in October. But really, the only times that we would cite for this would be a very intentional, abusive, willful violation. And the discussion was in those types of situations, though didn't seem like that it should be. It was a serious thing. It might require us to take a vehicle out of service so it could be cleaned. It might kind of also be considered assault. And it could create, again, a big public safety issue. And so that's why we took those out. There already are kind of allowances in the law if you, for the urinating and defecating, if somebody doesn't have the kind of mental capacity to control that, that's then not allowed, and that's not a violation under Penal Code 640. So really this is for very intentional types of acts, and that's the only time that we would cite. So we did exclude those based on the discussion and kind of considering the operational impacts that they do have. The other thing that we are proposing in this draft ordinance is what are the disqualifying factors? So where would you no longer be eligible to participate in the penalty administrative penalty program? And that would be a third or subsequent violation. We did make it of the same provision, so to the extent that, there's a list of 10 things that you're not allowed to do, it would have to be your third violation of one specific thing, not any of the category. So I felt like that put people a little bit more on notice. And then as is also currently a rule for our diversion program, that you would be disqualified from participating if your eligible violation, is paired with a non-eligible violation. So the example is often kind of fare evasion and vandalism, or fare evasion and a failure to comply. We're really trying to use these programs as like a de-escalation tactic. And so to the extent that a fair contact really escalates and gets like that normally leads into then a citation for failure to comply. And it doesn't seem to make sense to separate those two violations where one would go criminal and the other one would go administrative penalty, especially because it's normally a more serious situation involved there. So then those violations would follow the normal criminal citation process. And it is important to note that by statute, those eligible violations, if they're committed by a minor, would always be processed under ordinance number 14. Those are not, those do not go to court even for third or subsequent violations. So, other just kind of administrative features about the penalty program that are set forth in the ordinance and part of the statute is that, we would be required to have printed information about the program requirements and various deadlines. We would have to send late notices after the 21-day, deadline missed or after the 90-day deadline for collections. We have to have a written notice of decisions for both this initial review stage, which is very similar to what we currently do on the limited appeal and the admin hearing stage. And then you have a right to appeal to the Superior Court. And then we're required to put in place a process and procedure for people to request either an option for community service or a payment plan if they can demonstrate an inability to pay. As we've looked through the program, some of this is really preliminary because until you go out to a solicitation, it's hard to judge what the cost and revenue generation would be from having this program in-house. We did estimate that there would be some one-time costs to implement this of about $375,000. That relates to program management. We would really need either a full-time equivalent employee or a consultant to help kick this program off and see it through the solicitation and process. We also would have to get new electronic citation devices and have those customized because right now, to do this program, you would really need to have real-time information of how many citations has this person received, that they would, when they're citing them, they need to know it. There'd be an added benefit that then we wouldn't have to manually data entry like all of our other citations into the system. But then there's also marketing and outreach. And we do think that for a viable program, it would be good for the staff that's ultimately going to run this program to do some additional research and site visits to agencies that already have one in place, and see how they operate and how their hearings happen, how their citation process, just in general. So we kind of put in a little bit of cost for those research and site visits. On an annual basis, we're estimating that it would be between $600,000 and $725,000 per year to run this program. That would be the program management. It looks like most agencies, so not only do you get these electronic citation devices and customize them, but then you lease them on an annual basis instead of like purchasing them. So that would be like the annual lease costs, software, cloud storage, vendor processing fees for all the notices that would need to be going out, and the hearing officers and somebody to collect the citations and the fine revenue and keep accounting of that. There should be some offsetting revenue to net out those costs. Again, it was a big, not necessarily a guess, but it was our best estimate of what and how, under this program, these fines would be a little bit more than we think we normally would get from the court, and they would all stay with us. They wouldn't be shared with other agencies. So we looked at kind of what would the citation fines estimates be of what we would collect less if we had to use a collections vendor, what their commission would be. But then we also would no longer be collecting some of our fairly small amount of diversion program revenue or some of the court revenue that we get. And so netting that out, we think that probably it's a $375,000 one-time cost and then an annual cost of between $340,000 and $465,000. Those numbers would all be subject to us going out in the market and finding out what does each of these components actually cost us when we are ready to do a solicitation. So the next timeline would be if this is something that the committee wanted to forward to the board for a recommendation to approval, then we would look to include ordinance number 14 on either the June or July board agendas for action. And then, we think the first year, so kind of fiscal year 27, would take us the time to hire the project manager, whether that's an employee or a consultant, and conduct competitive solicitations for that new electronic citation hardware and software and an administrative program vendor. And then we think that it would take about another year to implement that. We'd have to roll out this new citation, certify it, train it. We also would have to have the added component of integrating it with our Pronto inspection system, of like it being able to read the Pronto cards. There would be a real problem if our officers have to have multiple handheld devices that they carry around with them. So that's just another issue we'd have to problem solve. We want this citation software to do everything. And so we think that once we get a contract for that, it will take a while to actually get that product. And during that time, then we would work with that project manager and the administrative program vendor to draft various policies and procedures and conduct a public outreach and education campaign. And if all of that went, then, we would anticipate sometime after July 1st of 2028 being able to kind of really roll out that program. This obviously you're welcome to give me feedback on draft ordinance 14. We can bring it back to you as well. But if you wanted to move it on from today, that's kind of our estimated implementation timeline. So the staff recommendation is that you all discuss and consider if this is something you want us to do, or you can provide other feedback to us.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We have been having this conversation for a very long time, so appreciate all of your input throughout the years. Do we have any public comment?
No public
item?
comment, Chair.
Okay, can we go back, I think one slide.
Just tell me when to stop.
Wait, oh, okay, no, it was either, I think it was 13, but I think I probably forgot my question. Do we know like our current security contract, when we have to look at renewing that?
That is actually going to be ongoing anytime because I'm pretty sure it expires at the end of this calendar year.
Okay. I'm just thinking about, the way that I see this is a huge ecosystem, right? So we had the two discussions previous to this that really narrowed in on the types of violations that make people super uncomfortable on the transit line, and ways to really hone in on that. And then, of course, around fare evasion, what, a lot of the feedback that I've heard is just the culture of the line, like, right, everyone should pay their fair share. We should make sure that that happens. And what I've just been trying to mitigate is sort of the way that the fines follow a person when they do get back on track or trying to, re-enter society and get a lease or all those things, how these fines have been showing up for people in a way to kind of mitigate that, but showing kind of this distinction between the different types of violations and the impacts that they have on transit. So I really think this was a good meeting so far to show us that, but also acknowledging like what is behind this is we want people to pay, and the administrative process would allow for them to not have to have sort of a criminal record or have that as an absolute last resort. But we're still able to ban people. We're still able to do all the things. And the violations that we kept out of the administrative process through this presentation are can be criminal violations, if I am understanding that right.
Yes.
Okay. So I did have a couple of questions just about the timeline as well. In the 21-day period. So what would happen at the 21-day period?
Yeah, and I'm sorry if I didn't provide a slide on this issue. So under the statute, you have 21 days from issue of citation to request an initial review. So that's basically to contest the citation.
Mm-hmm.
And when you contest that citation, that is like a free process. So if within 21 days, you contest the citation, then MTS would have to do that initial review of whatever reason that you thought you shouldn't have had it, and then respond. There's no deadline to respond, but I would estimate, 10 days for MTS to evaluate and respond, and then we would issue them a decision. And so, if it's successful, then citation's gone. If we reject their initial review request, then a new 21-day period would start from when we said, hey, we've rejected that. And they would have 21 days to either request an administrative hearing, or if they don't, then that's final at that point. And so
And whatever the fee is, that's what they would have to submit.
then they would have to pay that $75. So you
Okay.
get kind of an extension on the $75 fine through the initial review process. And under the statute, it does require, in order to request an administrative hearing, so that's like the second type of review, you do have to prepay your citation amount. So and then there's a time period to do the hearing. And if you haven't, we are required to adopt a process and a policy of what people need to show to prove inability to pay. And so then if they show that, then we would be able to defer the payment of the $25 until after the appeal hearing. And then even if their appeal is not granted, then we can offer community service, deferred payment, or an installment plan for whatever fine is ultimately imposed.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation, because I was looking at maybe trying to extend that, but it doesn't sound like that's necessary, just based on the process. So again, we've been kind of working and going back and forth on the idea of this since 2019. We did institute the Fair Evasion Diversion Program. But I also want to acknowledge MTS leadership. During that time, our leadership did call for the peer review under APTA, or the American Public Transportation Association, and that was done in September of 2020. And from that peer review, there was also a recommendation to proceed with establishing an administrative fair enforcement policy, as well as other actions for more inclusive approaches to public safety for the transit system, which I will say the staff has been very responsive to that holistic approach. So I would like to move this forward to the full board. I am okay with the timeline, and I think we should also consider, our security contract and looking at the cost of this, which I know, we just had an executive committee meeting where we talked extensively about our budget and what we're facing, but also want us to keep in mind sort of our security contract and how we can think about paying for this programming through some of that funding as well. That I think I don't remember the amount. I'm recalling like 35 million. I'm not sure. That could be completely wrong. But the point is, I really would like to prioritize this and find ways to make up for that $400K or so that it looks like it would be an annual expense. And I do think the timeline allows for us to have more thoughtful conversations around that. So with that, I'd like to move the item, and I would encourage any of my colleagues, if you have any thoughts. Member Hall.
So I just want a clarification. Can you go to 12? What's it going to cost us from what we're doing now to what the new plan?
This would be all new costs. The only costs, or we do get some revenue, only about $12,000 a year from our diversion program, and kind of between the 20 and 40,000 from the court. And so that is revenue that currently comes in from those avenues, and we wouldn't get those anymore because we would be getting presumably higher fine revenue by collecting the full $75 or to $125 ourselves. But we have assumed.
What's our net loss? Let's put it that way.
Yes.
What is the net loss?
Well, so the net program cost under our current estimates is that one-time $375,000 new cost, and then annual in that kind of $340,000 to $500,000 probably range.
So if we forget the original cost, but if we stayed where we would, we'd get 40,000. And again, clarify it for me. Maybe I'm misunderstanding, or we'd lose 460,000. Is that the way I'm reading it?
The plus or minus $40,000, but because the 465 includes like taking out that revenue we're getting today.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so, okay, and then going back, so basically it's a loss to change over at this point.
We would have costs because right now that is all handled by the Superior Court. And so we would have to create a program and an infrastructure to be able to like process this.
After the third violation, does it go to the court or do we just keep sending them new tickets?
Under the current draft ordinance, then it would go to court. So you would be
All
entitled to
three of
purchase.
them?
You would be entitled to and have participated in or ignored the administrative program for the first 2 violations. And then the third violation and any further ones after that would not be eligible for this program and they would go to court.
Okay. So if they don't pay the first one, then they go to use their Pronto card, are we going to suspend their Pronto card?
That is not a consequence that's covered by the administrative penalty program.
Okay. And then basically enforcement, you've kind of said that it doesn't pencil out to do this. I just want to, again, one more time, I apologize. We're going to lose a lot of money, $1 million in 2 years almost, to do this program.
There
And
would be a
we're,
cost for the program. Yeah.
all right, thank you. I'm sorry, I can't support this.
Member Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. Let's go to slide 7, if you could, please. If you do not pay the fine, you in 21 days contested, if you don't pay the fine, and there's a collections fee of $125, does a collections fee mean that it's turned over to a collections agency?
That would be because MTS does not have the capacity to continue trying to seek and collect fines. And so the way that the other agencies do it as well is that you try to internally collect the fine up to a certain point, and you use that by trying to put the late fees and encourage people to pay them. But under this system, then if after the 90 days, from the first reminder notice, if you don't pay, then there would be it would be a total of $125. And then we would anticipate that as part of the program management that a collections vendor would then take it from there.
Okay.
If I may, Chair, I would want to kind of link together what you suggested about the security contract. We also are looking at, could we get a turnkey third-party operation where they would, be able, and could it be an option in our security contract? These are all things that we have to develop. It wasn't developed for this meeting, but it might be something like that where we take it out of the hands of the agency and we delegate it to a third party.
Where I'm going with this is the chair's concern that this could follow you when you go to try to rent an apartment, and you have the collection agency often reports to a credit bureau things that you have defaulted on.
Yes.
And when you go try to apply for a car loan, an apartment lease, and they check your credit and it's ruined because of a $125 fee, I'm just trying to get a sense, what's the unintended consequence? Where are we going with this thing? So when you send it out to an outside agency, the next question is going to be, are they going to report defaults to a credit agency? I brought that up last October. I don't know if you've had a chance to research that.
Well, of course, that would be the stick to make them pay.
I understand. I'm really honing in on the chair's concern that this follows you for a long time.
But it wouldn't have a criminal component.
It doesn't,
Yeah.
but I
that's my
cannot
only
get
point.
credit if, or.
Well, I would rather have a collection item on credit where I can dispute or show payment than to have a criminal conviction that follows you in a different type of way and also gives a different type of stigma as well. So yes, there are still consequences, but it's just the variation of that or the degree of that. But point well taken.
Fair enough. Slide 10, please. So you've got in caps there, same provision. Let's go back to slide 8. There's the list. So you're saying it has to be 3 fare evasions, not 3 from this list.
It would be the third, so the first 2. Now, obviously, this is something that the committee and the board has discretion to do. You can say any 2 violations and then the third of any kind, you're done. But to the extent that, there was, somebody wouldn't connect a citation for one thing, with another.
Let me
The
use
proposed draft is the same provision, but that's something you all can.
let me use the example. You are cited twice once for fare evasion, once for food, and then the third citation is that your third instance, or because you've used up your 2 in this list, or does it have to be identical to from any one point in this list?
The way that I drafted the draft ordinance, it would have to be 2 fare evasion.
Okay.
So if you did a fare evasion and eating where prohibited, and then you got a second fare evasion, that you would still be able to do the administrative program for that second fare evasion. If you had a third fare evasion in the future, then you would not be allowed to process. that.
Sounds good. Okay.
Yeah, because you can imagine there's a lot of people who get multiple violations because they're doing a lot of different things at the same time. This kind of will reflect instead that,
Okay.
are they repeat offenders of the same thing?
Sounds good. When we issue a citation today, what happens if you're not able to identify the person? That's probably a question for our director of security. How do you issue a citation to somebody you can't identify?
I mean, so there certainly are situations that, we have to address where we get a fake name, or the information is incorrect. And ultimately, if you can't connect that to a person, then that citation will not get, followed up on. It either will be dismissed at the court phase. It might be dismissed at our phase if we can't reconcile, what and who it is. There's a little hope that if you did this new electronic software, that it would help in identifying the person. But that is, sometimes you get people writing, we'll have similar names, like for the diversion program research, you would do reports and you'd have a very similar name, but like a slightly different, middle initial or a day off on a birthday. And that's just something we have to deal with today. And it would certainly be something that would impact the ability to, enforce the citations.
Understood. Okay. Thank you. So really the cost of this program is able to track people's citations. Today, we have no idea how many citations we've given to somebody, correct?
We can we enter them into ARGIS. And so we can enter reports, but then there's a lot of reconciliation of, is this the same person or not?
A CCI goes to say, you don't have a fare. I don't have the ability today to know his history.
Correct. Absolutely.
Okay, there we go. So this would have a handheld device that would say, you're giving me this name. I see your history.
Yes.
Correct. Okay, so it's a program cost to track history in real time, in a sense. Now, it is a program cost. Today, and it's a program cost for the first 2 instances, because on the third instance, you go to court. You're not part of this administrative program.
Correct.
So we're talking about the cost of the program is for the first 2 contacts and the ability to track that these are your first 2 contacts. Today's program, the first contact, you can ask for a waiver. You can say, you know what, first time, would you forgive it? Yes, we will. So now we're down to, it's kind of, it's tough. Here's where I'm going with this. So your staff report on page 6 says you expect 1,000 to 2,000 of these citations per month. And if I roll that up into an annual thing, and then I divide, let's go back to slide 13, I think it was, the annual net cost. Slide 12. And to Member Hall, what we have today is we're getting 20 to 40,000 income, or we will pay 340 to 465 for this program. So it is a swing. The question is, what's the value that you get out of this? If you roll up your estimated volume for this, it comes out to about $14 to $39 per citation is the cost of this thing, which is kind of mind-blowing to me because it would be cheaper just for the CCI guy to pull out a $5 bill and say, I'll pay your fare. And there's your first strike, because that would be cheaper than this thing. But the value here is tracking. We just don't have the ability to track how often people abuse our system.
On an individual basis, correct.
You know, and they get the first time waiver anyway. So this is really about the second instance, because the third time it goes to court anyway. I'm having a hard time justify, every dollar counts to this organization now when you're in $100 million deficit. I have a hard time, I'm trying to get to the point where it makes sense to spend $350 to $465 for that second time. And we're actually paying to be able to track that. And if you just ignore it, there's no consequence.
That's a year or two, by the way.
I just think if somebody says, I'm going to ignore the $125, we did all this for what? I'm trying to help, somebody help me get there.
So I will certainly try. I do think the example around allowing people to just pay, we did as a board take that option away. And the reason why it goes back to something that I mentioned in the beginning of my comments is trying to promote a culture where there is a consequence for not being able to pay. So that is the sort of the consequence of saying, look, this is $5, because that's the way I would want to do it, right? Just if we have the machinery to and the systems to keep track of people, then we would have the system. So and we have those now to allow people to just pay. But the whole point is the consequence of the action, which was a board discussion and a committee discussion, and the majority of the committee and board landed there, where if you don't pay, there should be some kind of consequence for that. All I'm saying is if you don't pay or do some of the other things that were mentioned in the administrative model of enforcement, that it shouldn't be a crime. Like it shouldn't be something that follows you in the way that a criminal conviction does, because that is much, much harder to fight and to remove than it is, collections. People have collections on their reports for medical fees and things they're just not able to pay, right? And so for me, yes, that is the stick. And also it is something that we do control, that it comes directly to us. There may be other ways that we find out that we can better monitor our system through being able to withhold this type of data and the patterns that we see. Right now, it sort of goes into a black hole and then comes back to us in a $20,000 or $39,000 check. Right. So I do think, to your point about the data, that is a good one. I also just think that with regard to money, we may not be able to get there, because you mentioned a primary word, and that is a values conversation. And the reason why I have been advocating for this for 7 years is because it's a values conversation to me. And I do think that there's a cost to being more fair to people. And that's what this program represents for me. So I totally understand the challenges that we face, and that, we're all here to represent the interest of our part of the region, right? And that we may see that differently. And that is not for me, there's no judgment. It's just that I feel strongly about this. It is a values conversation to me. And I think we're getting to the point as an agency where we are delineating fare evasion as opposed to loot acts, which when I first started serving on this board, there was not a distinction really between the two. And so as we have these conversations more, that distinction is important. And so I think the punishment, so to speak, should fit whatever that violation is. And that's what the program represents for me.
I appreciate the point of view. In this program, the proposed program, on the third instance, it will go to court. Under our existing program, you have a diversion option. You have a diversion option on the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, nth ticket. That will never go to court. If you pay $25, if you do 3 hours of community service, it will never go on your record if a person takes responsibility to do that. That's the way out of that. This program says on the third thing, it will go to court. And that just seems not like what we're trying to accomplish here. If we're not trying to have something follow the record, we're not even giving them an option on the third time and the fourth time and the fifth time. It will go to court. So I'm kind of like, be careful what we wish for in this thing because it could backfire. Whereas in the third thing today, you could say, I cannot have another court thing. I'll go to work for 3 hours. And we're pretty lenient with the community service. I heard you can almost do anything that your city or whoever would say. If you want to go read to kids at a library, if you want to go pick up trash, it was pretty liberal on what community service was. So I'm kind of nervous to
Just
ding somebody
FYI,
on
we
the
do
third
have
try.
the options here for community service. I think one of the slides does show that we do still hold those options even if they're not in the framework of the previous diversion program. But I understand your point. I mean, it's something to think about. If there's an amendment that would resolve that, then I'm open to that. But I just going in do feel that the administrative process will, as long as people take responsibility, like you said, will put people in a better place.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Chair. For that reason, I can't support the program because it doesn't even give somebody a chance on the third, fourth, or fifth. And I think that's really the concern of many people is I don't want to ding them in a criminal sense. And I think this forces that hand.
Criminal and financial.
We could take that off the table. We could take the third 3 strikes off the table and just have that be administrative, if that's a concern. Let's go to Member Foster.
Thank you. And just if you can kind of level set for me, where are we at in regards to process? Do we have a motion, a second? Where are we at?
I moved staff recommendation.
Okay. And so I think process-wise, if this were to pass today, we would go to the full board in which we can have a full discussion with the board and continue to look at if we were to remove the court deal or whatever, correct? Is that
Correct.
accurate?
I
Okay.
think that the May agenda is going to be pretty big. So that's why I was targeting kind of June or July that we would bring this to the board if that's the direction that we got.
Okay. With that, I'll go ahead and second the motion so we can move this along and continue the meeting. Thank you.
Chair, I would just to clarify, I have a draft ordinance that is attached. If the vote is, I would like some discretion to do like one more cleanup review. I wouldn't make any substantive changes based on what we did, but to the extent identify some language that maybe is a little bit less clear than it could be, I would like the ability to clarify that before a draft is brought to the board.
Okay, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with, I don't know that I need to add that authority in the motion, but I'm fine with that. Okay, Member Hall.
I would just like a slide showing the cost. We said the 40,000 versus the 460,000. I would like that on a slide.
In the presentation for the
This
board.
is our annual for the next 10 years. We're going to make 40,000 times 10, and we're going to lose 400 times 10. I'd like that on the slide.
Anyone else? I see.
Just to, I'm
yes.
sorry, just, I think if we are going to, facilitate such a request, I think we should look at there was quite a conversation on what the existing program is. So if we can have a benchmarking chart or something that shows that as well, I think that would be good as well.
I will work
Because
on
I think, again, I don't think we're too far off, but I think there should be some latitude to potentially address the concerns. I think there's a path. We just need to have the information in front of us and
Absolutely.
let
I'll
us go to work.
I'll
and
create
do what
some
we do.
exhibits or slides
Okay.
that kind of
Thank you.
expand on that.
Okay, and Ms. Cooney mentioned as well some of the potential options that we have within a security contract that I think would, I would like to be part of the conversation as well. The collections issue. I would like for us to think about the money that we do spend on security, and look at the costs within that lens of this program. But it is a fair point. So I think if it goes to the full board in June or July, it gives us an opportunity to think about it a little bit more, bring some suggestions there to the board and just see kind of where we're at. I've always just wanted to have the conversation, and I am, sometimes we do move things forward that have unintended consequences. I still feel strongly about the administrative process for the reasons that I've stated, but there's always more things to consider, especially with something this complex. Member Dillard.
Yeah, I just, one thing that's missing here is that if we did put this program in place, that when people start to find out about this program, it actually stops them from even going forward and trying to cheat. And that's not really being factored into this because that could make up a lot of the income that we're actually missing from people who evade paying at all. So I don't know if that is a possibility to be included, but I think that we should be considering that additional revenue that we will have because people spread the word and encourage other people not to do it if they just don't want to go down that path. And I think that in itself is something that we should be considering as the additional income that we will receive. Because again, we talked about culture. And if people know that it's just going to be a hassle for them, they might just go ahead and just pay the fee and not try to evade. So just a consideration.
Thank you. Member Goebel.
In your packet, Member Foster brings up a good point, a side-by-side comparison of this, that, before. Also, I believe at the October meeting, we had some statistics on the diversion result. How many people participated in the diversion? How many people paid the $25? How many people just said, forget it, and it's hanging out there? That would be helpful background as well to know if we choose an administrative thing, how does that compare to today's administrative diversion program?
Okay.
That would be a good slide for background as well.
It sounds like all of Karen's presentations to us in one.
Yes.
Yeah, so we'll need time to discuss this, but appreciate it. And I don't see any other members with anything to say. I really do appreciate the discussion. And okay, I saw you come up. And if there's nothing else, we do have a motion and a second on the floor. Please vote.
Members, please make your selections on the tablets. Chair motion passes.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you again, members of the committee for the discussion. And so we will go on to number 7, which is committee member communications or other business. Anyone have anything that they would like to share? No? Okay. Our next meeting will be July 10th, 2026. please check your emails. I may be looking for a change to that. But so far, it's scheduled at that time, that day at 1 p.m. We are adjourned. Thank you.